Hey guys, welcome to Bethel Online. My name is Jason. I'm one of the pastors here, and we're so glad you decided to make us a part of your weekend. No matter who you are, where you come from, we're so glad you're here. Our vision is to be a safe place for real people to encounter the real Jesus and experience real change. Our hope and our prayer is that no matter who you are or what you've been through, you know that you are loved and you are wanted here. We would love to get to know you better and help you connect with all that's going on. You can do this by going to our website at www.bethel.us or by downloading the Bethel app. You can find our app by searching Bethel Putco in your app store. Both online and in the app, you can fill out digital connection card. It only takes a minute and it'll help us know how to serve you better. Another way you can connect today is through giving. Your generosity at Bethel directly impacts God's mission to radically change people's lives in Putnam County and beyond. Through the ministries of Bethel and the many local and regional organizations we support, people are able to see the grace of God and how much He loves them. You can always give on our website at bethel.us/give or in the Bethel app. Thank you for partnering with us and making a difference. Well, thanks again for tuning in online today. Know that you are wanted and welcome here, and you are loved. I hope you all have a great day.
Do you ever get tired of your own crap? Like seriously, I don't know about you, I can get frustrated with others, but when I'm really honest, over the course of my life and in my relationship with God, I most often find myself frustrated with me. Like there are issues in our lives that we think, I'll take care of that, or I'm going to become different, but then we kind of find ourselves back struggling. And maybe it's the level of faith that we have and trust that we have in God. And maybe it's a behavior that we're trying to change. Maybe we're hot-tempered and we're trying to, remain calm, and we find ourselves over and over in similar spots. The good news, my friends, is the story and the character that I'm going to talk to you about today. His name was Peter, and Peter was by all means a pretty overzealous, go-getter kind of guy who met Jesus. And his initial encounter really changed the direction of his life, but his continued encounter with Jesus changed everything. And over the course of his life, you find Peter back in these situations where it appears that maybe he's lost faith again, and he claims he has big faith in God, but then he has these moments where he seems to struggle with his doubt, and he seems to struggle with his fear and the trustability of God. And I wonder sometimes if it's not those struggles, those moments in our struggles when we're tempted to actually distance ourselves with God with the idea that we've disappointed God, rather than stepping back into quick relationship with Him and walking with Him, abiding in Him. The story of Peter begins in John chapter 1, verse 40. Jesus is inviting disciples to come and follow Him. According to the scriptures, there are actually a couple times when Jesus invites Simon Peter. In two different gospels, there are accounts. One in which Jesus finds him alongside the beach with his brother as a fisherman, and he invites him to come and follow him. And he tells him he'll make him fishers of men. In John chapter 1, verse 40 and 42, we get another account of Jesus inviting Peter to come and follow him. You see, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the two people who heard what John had said and who had followed Jesus. Andrew, Peter's brother, was starting to follow Jesus. And as soon as he started to follow Jesus, he went back to tell his brother, because he wanted his brother to know about Jesus. And it says the first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon and tell him, "We have found the Messiah." And he brought his brother to Jesus. And Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas," which when translated is Peter. Interestingly enough, in this moment, his first interaction with Jesus is Jesus giving him a new name. Simon was a word that actually meant reed a reed in the wind, like a weed on the edge of a pond, swaying in the wind. It was the word, often names were given and they kind of began to define people. But in this moment, he has an interaction with Jesus and Jesus changes his name to Peter, which is actually Greek for rock. You see the two differences, the name he was given and the name he was to become. Most of his life, you see these moments where Peter really wants to live up to being the strong, confident rock, but you also, woven into his life, see moments where he seems to still be a little of who he used to be, not who God called him to be. You see, sometimes we struggle to believe and live from the identity that Jesus gives us. The truth is, when you begin to follow Jesus, you're given a new identity as one of his kids, where you are now defined by who he says you are, by who he's called you to be, not who you once were. And in this moment, Peter's given a new name. But through the course and the history of his life, we see him struggle. And I wonder, as he went through these different struggles, these highs and lows of his lives, the moments where he said, I'll follow you anywhere, but then he denies Jesus, the moments in which he goes to walk on the water and his faith grows weak and he fails. I wonder if he had moments of shame where he distanced himself from Jesus because of the condemnation of his past. I think if we're honest, we all struggle to live the way we claim to believe. If you're a follower of Jesus, if you ever stepped into a relationship with Jesus, you had a moment where you're like, I'm going to be different. I'm going to change and I'm going to experience a total transformation in my life. And then we hit a snag and we fall back into an old sin or we fall into an old behavior, or that shameful thing from our past seems to resurface and we find ourselves identifying with what we once were. I think we all struggle to live the way we claim we believe. And when we do, there's an inner condemnation that can happen, and the enemy likes to whisper in our ear, no, you're still a reed in the wind. You'll never become the rock. In John chapter 13, verse 33 through 38, Jesus is preparing his disciples. He's preparing them for what's to come, and he's telling them while they've been following him, walking with him, it's only going to be for a little while longer. And Jesus says, I'll only be with you a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I now tell you, where I'm going, you cannot come. A new command I give you, love one another as I've loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. And Simon Peter asked him, Lord, where are you going? I mean, after all, Simon Peter, when he was given a new name, Simon Peter got a new crowd. Simon Peter began to walk differently. He began to find new significance in his life that he had never found before. And now Jesus was saying he couldn't go with him. Peter didn't understand what Jesus was going to do. And Jesus says, where I'm going, you cannot follow now, but you will follow later. Peter asked the Lord, why can't I follow you now? I'll lay down my life for you. Then Jesus answered, will you really lay down your life for me? Very truly, I tell you, before the rooster crows, you'll disown me 3 times. And I have to think in this moment that Peter was like, but Jesus, I left what I knew and I came to follow you, and now I can't come with you. But Jesus, I would die for you. We're brothers. We're ride or die. I've been walking with you. You've been my rabbi, and I have been your student. I have followed you, and I would lay down my life for you because I claim allegiance to you as a disciple. I love this story because I think Peter really believes that he would. But he's got this very human side to him that's still very, very present. That in a moment he has the capacity to wave in the wind and to be moved around as the wind blew. I think over and over in his life, this very trait had left some real sting in Peter's life. I wonder if maybe even his father had wondered when he left that being a fisherman, if his father had or his family had questioned, like, what is he doing here? Like, he was a fisherman. Why is he going to do this? Like, we've known him as a fisherman. Why is he going to be a disciple? And yet, here he is, and Jesus is right. I love that Jesus is talking to him, even though Jesus knows he's going to fail him. Like, Jesus doesn't point out here, hey, you're going to totally whack out on me and flake out and be the flake that everyone knows you are. And what's the problem? No, Jesus tells him that he knows. And Jesus is about to do everything that he does, including his death on the cross and his resurrection, because he knows that without him, Peter will never become the best he can be. The thing is that a few days later, Jesus would go to the cross. And while he were being killed 3 times, Peter would claim to not even know Jesus. And some of us would say, oh man, he didn't love Jesus that much. He wasn't loyal. He flip-flopped. He's kind of all over the place. But I think maybe he bought back into the identity he had. And he failed. I wonder if he had a moment like we did at the start of the message where he said, man, I'm tired of my crap. Maybe that's all I'm ever going to be. But often when we fail, our greatest need is to trust what we already claim to believe. It's not that Peter didn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah. He was the first to recognize it. It wasn't that he didn't believe in the power of Jesus. He had seen it. But he was in the middle of stress and strain. And in the moments there where asked if he knew Jesus, he just quickly reverted to his old self. Over the course of his life, there would be so many moments that Peter would need to trust what he claimed he believed. Tests of his real discipleship to Jesus. Tests to the real transformation that God had promised in his life. After he failed and denied Jesus 3 times, Peter kind of goes back to who he used to be. And they find him fishing. It says, afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. And Simon Peter says, I'm going out to fish. All of them also said, we'll go with you. So they went out and they got in the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Can you imagine the condemnation that he's felt? He's failed the one that he loved. And now he's failing at what he knew before. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples didn't realize it was Jesus. I wonder what Simon Peter's thought process was in this moment of his life. Like, man, I thought I was going somewhere. I thought I was going to become the strong rock. I thought I was going to become a strong leader. And here I am, like, failing on every level. I love that Jesus had gone to the shore where he would once again affirm who Peter was to become, while Peter did not yet know it. Because God is in it for the process with us. When we get tired of who we are and how we've messed up, God is not done yet. Jesus stands on the shore, but the disciples didn't know it was Jesus. He called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? I love that his first response to them is not, traitors, you guys couldn't catch a fish in a bucket. But instead, he calls them friends and he calls to the problem and he says, you don't have any fish? They answered, no. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. Now, I can only imagine after a long night out on the lake After many fruitless attempts, after knowing very much how to catch fish, that it had to have been frustrating. And in this moment, Peter had to actually show some faith that maybe he didn't think he had. He had seen Jesus interact enough that they throw the nets on the other side, but they were unable to haul in the net because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple who Jesus loved, John, who also wrote this book. I love that John refers to himself as the one that Jesus loved. He said to Peter, "It is the Lord." John recognized him. And as soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him and jumped in the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from the shore, about 100 yards. I love that in this story, Peter, after all this probably self-condemnation, I'm tired of this, I'm failure, I've messed up, I've jacked up, that he knows he can head straight toward Jesus. It said when they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. I think so many times Jesus had spoken into the brokenness of Peter's life in the moments of desperation, devastation, failure, heartbreak, and hurt, that Peter knew the only solution was to be reunified with Jesus. That the only assurance that was going to give him peace, the only thing that had any potential to help him change was Jesus. And so there they were eating fish and bread. And Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you've just caught." So Simon Peter climbed back in the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153, but even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" They knew who it was. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. Now, I can imagine that they hungrily ate and they were back in the presence of each other, but I wonder underneath it all if Simon Peter was like, what's Jesus going to be like now? I mean, I was just claiming the other day that I was going to be his ride or die, and I bailed off the minute that I needed to trust him. Jesus turns to Simon Peter and says, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said. "Do you know that I love you?" Jesus said, "Then feed my lambs." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Then take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time. "Do you love me?" he said. "Lord, you know all these things. You know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Then feed my sheep." You see, he hadn't really been pushed out. He had never stopped being a disciple. He was limiting himself from the interaction with Jesus by running back to what he had known. He had stopped claiming who he was in Christ and reverted to who he had always been known as. Jesus goes on to say, "Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and you went where you wanted. But when you are old, you'll stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go." And Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. And then he said to him, "Follow me." What Jesus was saying here is, you will still be who I called you to be. You still are who I called you to be. You might have failed. You are not who you once were, and you are not what you did. You are who God says you are. By the way, Peter would later be crucified. Legend has it that he chose to be placed upside down on the cross just to refuse to even be hung in the same manner as his Savior out of humility. You know, sometimes we hate our failures so much that we never hand them over, when it might be that our greatest contribution to God's kingdom can come out of our greatest failure. You see, this deep moment of failure that seemed like he had reverted to who he used to be was actually a launching pad for Peter. It was a launching pad for his confidence. That when he spent time in the presence of God, he actually did become the strong leader in the early church. Not too far off, Peter would be the initial speaker who spoke at Pentecost, laid out quickly the gospel message of a resurrected Jesus who came to save the world. And 3,000 people would come to know Jesus in one day, and Peter would become the rock on which the church was built. He would become what Jesus had called him to be. So if you're tired of your stuff, know that God is not so tired to have a relationship with you. You've not gone too far, you've not run away too many times. God's a good Father in heaven who wants a relationship with his children. Today would be a prime day to run to him. Hop out of the boat you're familiar with. Hop into trust. God can handle your trust. Bethel, I hope you have a great week. And I hope when you fail, you know you can turn to Jesus. I love you and have a great week.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Are you ready to take your next step? We would love to hear from you. You can send an email to hello@bethel.us. You can send us a message on Facebook, or you can let us know in the Bethel app. And speaking of the Bethel app, take a moment, if you haven't already, to go to your app store and search Bethel Putco to download our app. There's all kinds of great resources in the app. You can listen to messages, you can view the messages from Sunday morning, and you can also fill out a digital Connect card. You can do that today and each week to let us know that you're tuning in. You can also find some great information about our Bethel Kids Ministry and our Be the One student ministries. Also in the app, you can give. It's one of 3 ways you can give, with online giving at bethel.us/give, in our app, Bethel Putco, or through text. Hey, thanks again for joining us. We hope you have a great day and know that you are loved.